Good evening and welcome to 365 Days of Amazing Stories with Theo Mayer. Now, we are to day 44, and I'm continuing the story of the Mason, the adventure of the Mason. Now remember, we had left him where the old priest had left him, with a hood over his head, and the priest had told him that he must stay there until he heard the morning bells ringing, and if he were to take that hood off, that some evil would befall him. What do you think? Did he take it off before he heard the bells ringing, or not? Well, it turned out he busied himself with the gold coins that he'd received from the priest for the work that he had done. He clinked them together, felt the weight of them in his hand, and not too long did he have to wait before the bells began to ring. He took the hood off and found that he was standing by the shores of the Zenal River. He made his way home, and for the next couple of weeks, he lived in great abundance with his family. Everybody was quite happy with everything that they could buy with the money he had made in those 2 nights of working. But soon it was spent, and though he continued to work a little and pray a lot, his family was as gaunt and ragged as ever, looking more like a band of gypsies than a family that would be living in Granada. Well, it so happened that one evening there was a knock upon the door, and a very wealthy man came asking for him. This man, it was said, was a landlord and owned many houses, but he was known as a griping landlord. Not a very nice one, always finding something that was wrong. And he looked at the Mason for a while. His eyes, over his eyes were these shaggy eyebrows. And he looked at the Mason for a little bit, and then he said, "I hear that you are a very poor man." And the Mason said, "Well, that goes without question. You can see for yourself that it is true." And the man said, "I hear that you are a Mason, and since you're poor, then obviously you'll work for cheap." And the Mason said, "Well, as cheap as any other Mason in Granada, I'll work for that." He said, "Oh, good. Then I have a job for you, and it is a very, very special job. Will you come with me? And I'll show you." Well, the Mason agreed. And in the dwindling light of the evening, they made their way in a short time to a tall and stately house that was utterly in disrepair. And the landlord told him that he could get no one to stay there, and as a result, the house was costing him more money than it was worth, and that he was wondering if the Mason could bring it back into a reasonable state without him having to spend too much money. Well, he turned the key in the lock and then opened the door, both the sounds of which seemed familiar to the Mason. They walked through a number of empty rooms until they got to a center courtyard, and there in the center of that courtyard was a dry Moorish fountain. And as the Mason looked at it, he remembered the work that he had done there. Well, the landlord, he was standing there and showed him various places that needed the most attention. And the mason, having looked around now and realized where he was, he asked the landlord, "Pray, tell me, who was it that lived here?" "Fie on him," said the landlord. "What a pest," he said. "It was an old priest that lived here, said to be very, very wealthy. He died suddenly, and when he died, everyone thought that his money would be given to the church. But no one knew exactly where it was. Well, the priests and friars, they came, they searched through the entire house, but they found nothing. Nothing but a few ducats that were in a leathern pouch. They left. And though I have tried to rent it out to many tenants, it seems all of them, here in the room that the priest used to sleep in, they can hear the clinking of coins, as if the priest is counting his money, checking to see that it's all there. And it's not long before the tenants, they can't stand it anymore and they leave. They also complain about hearing groaning and moaning sometimes. I think it is all just a story, but look at the place." The mason held up his hand, said, "I will take this on. Let me live here rent-free, and I will restore the house to its original beauty and splendor. And let me live here until you are able to find some more suitable tenant than myself. I will also assure you that being the devoted person that I am to God, I feel certain that I will be able to placate that old priest that continues to inhabit your house." "Oh, yes, that would be great," said the landlord, "because you see, it seems that he inhabits the house without paying any rent at all right now, and there's nothing I can do to bring the law against a dead man. So that would be great. That would be great. Great indeed. We have an agreement. Please come to live, and we'll see how it all goes." The mason, the next day, and the next day, and the next day, he spent his time moving his family from the hovel that they lived in to this new house. And in the days and weeks and months that followed, he restored that old house back to its original splendor. Now, it's said that the sound of clinking coins completely ceased within that house and were replaced by the clinking of coins within the pockets of the mason. In the months that it took for the mason to bring the house back to its beautiful state, in that time, the landlord was able to find a new tenant. But as it turned out, the mason had plenty by that time to buy a beautiful place for himself and his family. And no longer did they look like a band of gypsies. It's said that he became one of the wealthiest men in Granada. And he gave great wealth, it is said, to the church. Perhaps to satisfy his conscience, who knows? But as far as I know, throughout his entire life, though he worked a little, he did pray a lot, and he gave himself over and over again to the service of God. And that, my friends, is almost the end of the story, except he never did reveal the secret of his wealth to anyone until on his deathbed, when he revealed the secret to his son and to his heir. And that's the story of the adventure of the Mason. Now, there's some interesting themes that go on there for me. Some that I think continue to plague the world that we live in now. That rich landlord, he felt because the Mason was poor that he'd be willing to work for cheap, work for not much money. I think it's true. I think there's a lot of people to this very day, very wealthy people, who, because someone is not so well-to-do, that person should be willing to work for cheap for them. Like it's some incredible blessing that they make any money at all. I think we can look around the world that we see today and see great inequality. I mean, how is it that one person's hour is worth so much more than another? And some of the most important things that people do are compensated at the very least. Take teachers, for instance. I mean, teachers, if you have a good teacher, what is more important in our world than a good teacher? A good teacher is creating the future. Seems to me that perhaps is, or should be, one of the most highly compensated positions that there is. But it seems very different than that. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting that is that an old priest ended up with so much wealth. Now, that should be a man of the church, man of God. Had no family, was not married. How did he come up with all that wealth? I mean, back in those days, a person could, or thought they could, pay the church or pay a particular priest a certain amount of money in order to ensure that they would make it to heaven. What a thing. What a thing. All right. Thanks for joining. Day 45 tomorrow. I will hopefully be telling you another tale from the Alhambra, since we're in that theme right now. Hope you have a good rest of your day or night, and thanks again for joining. Okay.